Hi everyone, I'm Richard Bailey. I just thought over the last little while we've seen a lot of changes in banking and that sort of thing in to do with real estate. I thought I'd better come and have a talk to someone who really knows what's going on. So I've come here to UpLoans where I found Kirsty Dunphey.
Thank you, thanks for having me. I'm excited to have a chat to you today.
What? Tell me a little bit. You're right at the cutting face. What are you seeing?
We're seeing huge changes at the moment. So interest rates are as low as anyone can remember them being. And it's a fantastic time for people to be reviewing existing mortgages, but also assessing their borrowing capacity, because people's borrowing capacity has recently gone up. So in that, basically, previously, like let's say you were applying for a home loan and the interest rate was 4%, for example. The bank didn't care whether you could afford to repay 4%. What they were assessing was your ability to repay about 7.25%. I know, and you can understand why though, because they don't want you getting into a home loan where if your situation changes slightly, you're, drastically, counting every penny. So it's good for them to have a buffer in place, and that buffer was set by the powers that be, and those powers that be have actually reduced that in the last couple of weeks. So most of the banks now have taken that 7.25% that they were typically assessing home loans at, some even up at 8%. Many of them are down now into around 5.5%. So what that's meant is that borrowing capacity for most people has drastically increased in the last couple of weeks.
By what sort of, if someone came in and wanted to borrow 300,000, what sort of difference does that make?
The tricky part of my job is that your borrowing capacity with one bank might be 300,000, with another it might be 200,000, and with another it could be 500,000. It really depends on how the bank look at you and your situation. So when there's things like rental income coming in, self-employed really varies it. But on average, it would not be unusual for a young first home buying couple's borrowing capacity to have even gone up as much as $50,000. But that doesn't negate the need still for a deposit. We were talking about that before. It's so important for first home buyers to be showing that commitment towards saving, but also, and this goes for everyone, not just first home buyers, but to be really mindful of living expenses at the moment. The banks are placing huge scrutiny, not only on what you need to spend to maintain your standard of living, but what you have been spending. So if you've been hitting Dan Murphy's every weeknight, or spending a lot of money traveling or clothes, Afterpay, those are the sorts of things that the banks are really, really cracking down on at the moment.
So what are you suggesting to people, that they stop spending altogether, or?
I want people to have a life still, but while you're saving for a home, that should be the time when it's easiest for you to be really conservative in terms of your living expenses. I think it's just about being mindful. Being really mindful, especially in the 3-month period before you put in an application. So the best thing someone can do who's thinking about getting ready to buy is not go and see their bank or a broker once they've signed a contract with you, but be really mindful. Get in to see a broker or a bank a couple of months before they want to buy. Get all that advice, get pre-approved, and hopefully get pre-approved by a bank that does a full assessment of their pre-approval, because some banks these days don't assess pre-approvals. It goes in one end through a computer and out the other end is pre-approved, but a human being hasn't touched it. So you might think you're pre-approved, or you might think by just going and having a chat with your bank that you're pre-approved, but you're actually not. So from your perspective, I can imagine if you've got a property, you've got 6 offers, you'd like to know that the one that you're taking through to the owners as the front runner is actually pre-approved and good to go.
Well, apart from anything else, it's just someone who comes and says, well look, I'm pre-approved to this amount of money, I've been to see Kirsty, that's what the deal is. Obviously I can go to my lender and say, look, this looks pretty solid. It doesn't matter whether there's 5 offers on it or 1 offer on it, because it does make a big difference.
It does, and at the moment another thing that's changed in the last couple of months is that the banks have all been heading towards this era of open credit reporting, which means that I can see when, Jim sitting across the table from me has been late on his credit card repayment in October of 2017, and I know that the bank can see that now too. So what we need to do is be really careful of everything ongoing while we're leading up towards making an application, but also make sure that if something like that has happened in the past, we've got a good explanation for it, and we're on the front foot with the bank in terms of talking about it. Because you never used to be able to see that information.
No. And quite often it used to be right at the end when a nasty that would pop up when you're a student that you forgot to pay a Telstra bill or something.
Which is why I love people getting pre-approved, because then hopefully if you go through a bank that's going to assess your pre-approval, any skeletons that might come out of the closet come out of it then.
Yeah, great. Yeah. So obviously deposits are really important. Now, does everyone have to get a 10% deposit, 20% deposit?
It depends on the lender and it depends on their circumstances. I always say there's really 4 ways that you can go about getting your deposit together. Old-fashioned savings, so first-home buyers need about 10%, other people need about 12% because there's some extra incentives in there for first-home buyers, and these are rough estimates, don't use them as gospel. You can get a gift for some of the funds as well if you've got a family member predominantly who'd like to do that, or you can have mum and dad put their property or cash up as a guarantor. And I say mum and dad, it's usually mum and dad that can do that. I love when my clients have saved up for their deposit themselves. Banks love that as well, and even if they are using a gift or a guarantor, also to show their commitments towards savings is definitely a help from an application perspective.
Yeah, that's great. Very good advice. Just finishing off, what else?
Okay, what else? Well, I'm concerned at the moment. Now, everyone is like, yay, interest rates are so low, but here's my concern. Your interest rate drops. Suddenly you've got all this extra cash that you could have used to pay down your mortgage. But if you keep your repayments at minimum repayments and you allow the bank to drop back your repayments, which is what your bank will want to do because they want you paying your mortgage off as slow as possible because it's more interest for them. My concern is it's like when you move into a house and you've got all this extra cupboard space and you say, we'll never ever fill that up, you do. And when you've got this extra cash, it will disappear. So my strong recommendation for people when talking about the home loan that's against their own home, I'm not talking about investment properties, but the home loan against your own home, unless you have high interest debt that you want to put that money towards. So if you've got a credit card bill, absolutely drop back your repayments and smash that credit card. But if there's nothing like that you're actually going to put this money towards, ignore the interest rate drops. Ignore them. And the reason I want you to ignore them is because it's amazing how much power putting extra money into your mortgage has over the long run. I mean, paying an extra $50 a week off a $300,000 mortgage can save you 6 years off your loan term. So my strong advice for most people is when the interest rates drop, give yourself a little fist bump, celebrate, but ignore them. When they go up, increase your repayments. When they go down, leave your repayments the same, or even still increase them if you can.
So do you have to go to the bank to tell them not to decrease?
If you're set at minimum monthly repayments, yeah, you definitely want to contact the bank. Change your repayments over to fortnightly, increase them, or tell them you want it set at this figure. There's even potential talk of another rate drop later on this year. Again, my advice will be, unless you've got a specific purpose, which is paying off higher interest debt, ignore it.
It's interesting when you just touched on is the fortnightly. It makes a big difference also, doesn't it?
Huge difference. Unless you have an offset account, if you've got a basic home loan, which so many people do these days, and there's some great basic products out there at the moment, just changing your repayments from monthly to fortnightly. And the banks will typically default to monthly because, again, you've got to think what's in a bank's best interest for you to pay that off as slowly as possible and for them to earn as much interest as possible. So paying fortnightly absolutely makes a huge difference. So usually I recommend you get paid 1 to 2 days later so that there's enough time for the money to clear in your bank account, your mortgage goes out. So I have another old adage. I'm like my nan. I have all these things that I say to clients day after day, and one of them is what you don't see, you don't spend. If that money's not there, you're not going to accidentally spend that. Right.
We have just on the side, we have 4 or 5 young ones at work, all saving. Some have already bought their houses, but some saving, and I know that they're working very, very hard on their savings. And we have a bit of a joke when we see one of them buy some lunch or something like that. But it's so important, isn't it? Just little things to be able to do that. So
it's not big screen TVs that actually impede people's saving. The people think, oh, it's those big ticket items, it's the trip to Fiji. It's actually not. It's takeaway coffee and buying lunch, and it's the little things in and out. It's going to the pub every week and shouting all your mates around. And I'm not saying don't ever do that, but it's about being mindful about those little things. And you know, I mean, if you're a smoker, there you go. There's a house deposit saved up in a year straight away. So
Kirsty, we won't
yeah. But like, I feel like it's the little things. So if you're a takeaway coffee addict, could you cut back to 1 or 2 a week as opposed to 2 a day? That's a house deposit. It really is. So there's little things we can all tweak, and I'm as guilty as anyone of having those things. So it's about choosing what's more important to you.
Kirsty Dunphey at UpLoans, thank you very much indeed for having a little chat with us today.
My pleasure.
I'm Richard Bailey, Bushby Property Group. Give us a call if we can help.